Well, good morning, everybody, or afternoon or evening, wherever you are. Welcome to today's field day for the Agricultural Genomes to Phenomes initiative. My name is Jack Dekkers. I'm a faculty member in the Pharma Science at Iowa State University, and I'm one of the co-PIs on the AG2PI grant, which is funded by NIFA, and that's what we're going to hear from today, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture of USDA. AG2PI was established as part of the 2018 Farm Bill, in which Congress directed NIFA to establish an AG2PI, an Agriculture Genomes to Phenomes initiative, with the aim is to initially get the plant and agriculture and livestock genetics and genomics communities to get together, research communities together, to get ready to embark on a hopefully an effort that will be funded down the line to embark on genomes to phenomes for agricultural species to make the use of genomics in to advance agriculture more efficient and effective. And so that's what we started. And the two members from NIFA who we will hear from today, Dr. Frank Siewert and Dr. Christian Tobias, they're part of the leadership team for AG2PI within NIFA, but they also are national program leaders in for animal breeding and genetics and genomics and plant breeding, respectively. So we'll hear about NIFA and the opportunities that it offers for research and the best practices for preparing research proposals that are successful, to increase the successfulness of your proposal. So the first speaker is Dr. Frank Siewert, and he will talk about opportunities for research funding in animal breeding and genetics. And Frank was a faculty member at two universities before he joined Cobb Ventures, a large multinational broiler genetics company. And then he joined NIFA, I think, a little over a year ago, and is, as I mentioned, a member of the AG2PI leadership team within NIFA. And then he also leads the Animal Breeding and Functional Annotation of Genomes program of NIFA, and as well the Welfare and Well-being of Agriculture Animals Research program. As usual, please, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. I'll view those, keep track of those, and if there are some that are pertinent at the time, I'll interrupt the speaker, but otherwise we'll just handle those at the end. So Frank, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jack. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and just present some of the possibilities that NIFA offers for research funding in animal breeding and genetics, and also appreciate everybody taking the time to be here today. I see a lot of familiar faces on the screen, some new ones, and I'm assuming here that there's a range of experience in terms of people having applied for funding before and not. So some of the contents may be well known to, or at least a good portion of the contents may be well known to some of the participants. So please bear with me because we're trying to make this relevant for a very broad audience. Anyway, as Jack has introduced, I'm a national program leader in the Division of Animal Systems at NIFA, and I've been with the agency just about 18 months now, or going on that pretty soon. So our current AG2PI team at NIFA are myself, and more in the animal side of things, Dr. Christian Tobias on the plant side, and Andy Funk, who's our program specialist and provides us with a lot of great support services. Prior to us, there are other NPLs that helped establish this program, and they're not longer working on it. Dr. Ed Kalekau, who retired at the end of the year, and he was pretty much the person that got this started from our end. Had also Dr. Lakshmi Matukumali, who was my predecessor here in animal genetics, and he's now at NIH. And Dr. Ann Stapleton, who is managing other programs at NIFA, although not directly involved in AG2PI. And prior to Andy, we had Shelby Service, who fulfilled that function very nicely for us. So Jack already gave a quick introduction on why does AG2PI exists, and this, as he mentioned, it's a mandate from Congress that appeared in the 2018 Farm Bill, and the idea here is really to, bring minds together, to support research activities in plant and animal genetics on all species of interest to the agricultural sector. Authorization was set at $40 million, but most of you know that authorization and appropriations are very different things. So, but anyway, that was the possibility from 2019 to 2023. And if you go to the Farm Bill and review that section, so NIFA has an obligation to address several statutory goals. I think the count is 11 for this program, and this is a program that's highly interdisciplinary in language. And so that's the nature of it, and why Congress authorized this as a separate program for us. In the first 2 years, we had $1 million appropriated each year for the program. So not the 40, but that wasn't a surprise for us. And so with limited amount of money, the thought process was to try to get as much leverage as possible to get the program started, maybe providing a good base for a much larger expansion into the future. So the RFA invited, coordination proposals, exactly for these collaborative efforts, and to help develop the community of researchers. I mean, there's a lot of good places, both on ARS and land-grant universities, that already had some programs, very strong programs, international recognition, some level of collaboration. But in some areas, those are more like an individual type of collaboration. One person, has affinities in research with others. This provides a framework to do this in a more formal and a broader sense, right? And keeping the focus on this, laying this foundation from this translation from genome to phenome. That RFA in 2020 received 4 proposals and 1 project was funded. That project is led by Iowa State, and it has strong collaborations with the University of Arizona, University of Idaho, and University of Nebraska-Lincoln as well. So I'm not going to go through those details of what was done with AG2PI on these first years, because that's already has probably been covered in previous meetings and field days. But 2021, we received an extra $1 million, and over there we did a direct supplemental funding for continuation of the good work that was established initially. Now for 2022, I'll let Dr. Tobias give an update on the funding scenario for those that don't know it already. And we already got notice that the budget has been approved, and so I will be dropping these 2 links in the chat at the end of my presentation, so you can, if you haven't had a chance to look at those yet, those provide some of the information on the agricultural side, and the second link more specifically what NIFA was awarded in this 2022 budget. So the awardees have identified a number of focus areas for AG2PI to pursue. And these are, at least in the way that I look at them, all around coordination, technology, and environment. Environmental protection is a big thing under the current federal administration. As we're getting the opportunity at NIFA, we're incorporating those into our request for applications. But we're encouraging people to pay good attention to that as they're sending their proposals in. So these 7 focus areas, the first 4 were in effect for the first round of seed grants. And then the bottom 3 were added for the second round. And it's interesting to mention that, this is a good approach because AG2PI is keeping this as a very dynamic process. As the program starts slowly maturing and new needs or new ideas come up, this list might be changing constantly, adding, removing, as we make progress in some of these aspects. You can notice there that not everything is strictly technical. The fourth focus area there, for example, deals with ethical, legal, social, ecological, and economic analysis. We, as scientists, our first instinct and the place we go to is really the technical side of it. But there's bigger questions around, or complementary questions around that are very well received in this program, as they should. So getting into the funding opportunities in animal genetics that NIFA has, I would say they fall, and this is very, this is my way of looking at it, fall in these 4 big buckets right now. Well, I'll elaborate a little bit on those. So the capacity programs, I got some more information on the next slide. That's the initial way to do it. And AFRI has 2 tracks here. One is the Foundation in Applied Sciences, which is where you get to a lot of the programs that you are mostly familiar with. And then there's the AFRI SAS, the Sustainable Agricultural Systems. And this one, I'm not going to go in more detail beyond this slide. This is the one that provides up to $10 million grants. It's a limited number of awards every year, but it does require fully integrated proposals with research, extension, and teaching. And the latter 2 cannot be just a token participation. They need to be fully incorporated into the goals. And so these are large, typically multi-institutions, and a great opportunity to find some funding that could help ask some very big questions. And then I like to add to that list AG2PI, which also is providing some level of funding now, and hopefully this allowance that we get from Congress will keep increasing over the years. Getting a little bit more into what these programs offer in terms of seed grants, Hatch is the first stop. These are capacity programs, and they're almost 40% of the money that NIFA receives. Not only Hatch, but you talk about all the capacity programs that come under different lines. So sometimes you need that little money to get started on something. Your experimentation directors could make that allocation for you. We realize that a lot of Hatch money is spent with salaries, but they should also be able to support a little more beyond that. AG2PI has come up with a system, and if my latest information is correct, you have 3 tiers of funding that you can request, and they go up to $75,000 depending on the stage or the reach that they have. So that information can be obtained at the AG2PI website for a little more detail. And AFRI also offers seed grants up to $300,000. So these do not have to be only for new investigators. And when we talk about seed grants, at least in the programs that I help manage, we make sure that we take that to heart. You don't have to have any preliminary data, and make sure that the panels understand that, well, it doesn't have preliminary data. That's the purpose of the seed grant. So putting preliminary data in there shouldn't give you an advantage, and not putting should not take any merit from you. These seed grants, the main goal of those is to allow people to collect data and prepare to submit a full grant proposal, a full standard proposal, where you're going to get to address all the questions that you have around it. And also, although this is not directly a seed grant opportunity, AFRI offers a program that's called Partnerships, where you can work with foreign institutions, with other US institutions that have been identified as historically underserved, or smaller institutions where sometimes there's not the enough critical mass to have a strong program there, although there's great individual scientists working there. So this could be an opportunity for the rest of the community to get involved and maybe partner up with a larger institution or one that's more established already. And so you can see that as a kind of sea grant for some of our colleagues that haven't been able to be successful so far. You know, on the slide where I identified the focus areas of AG2PI, there's a lot of things there that are not technical. And, you know, when you talk about genetics, there's always going to be a lot of pressures coming from society and, you know, even from other countries, which could create or impose trade barriers on US agriculture and from other countries as well. So, you know, one thing that's not very well established that out there is the public perception of animal genetics. I'm sure that many of you have seen this picture or have read Jerry Havenstein's papers from 25 years ago, where he compared broilers from 1957 and present day as of the dates that they did the study. The last study was in 2005. Compared the genetics and the nutrition and saw what proportion of each of these two factors contributed to the advances. And of course, when people look at a photo like that and say, well, what's happening here? And we know better. We know that there's nothing wrong there. Matter of fact, if you do the math, all you're doing is adding 2 chicken nuggets to that fellow there on the left, and you get the bird on the right. So it's this slow and steady progress. Sometimes you add a technology, you're able to do a smaller leap. Sometimes it's a one-time leap. Sometimes it's an increasing of that slope. But we know the science behind it, and we need to do a better job communicating them. AquaBounty is a great example with their transgenic salmon, still, you know, going with still struggling with regulatory and acceptance. But they had this done for 4 years now, a very fast growing salmon, and they're still not being able to capitalize fully on that. You know, it's when these things are not well explained, you start having, you know, limits to what you can export. And I would say, fortunately, not a lot of big boycotts are successful, but you know, no company likes to have bad raps, and no university likes to be singled out for doing research that's detrimental or questionable. You know, a lot of times the perception will prevail, and the facts take a back seat. I think it's our responsibility as scientists to help facilitate that. You know, help facilitate actions and influence policies where sometimes the science doesn't really prevail on those. So I'd like to bring up a different program that NIFA has that's called the Biotechnology Risk Assessment. And it's the BRAG, it's the last line on this slide. And BRAG is a program that funds science that provides information to the regulatory agencies. So we have a joint participation of university scientists, some people from companies, and a lot of the regulatory agencies. You're talking about FDA, you're talking about APHIS, you name it. All these agencies are represented, and when they want to give approval for a genetically engineered product, whether it's animal or plant, they want to make smart decisions and they want science. So that's part of the funding of science with that intent. Matter of fact, in the BRAG program, we let the regulatory agencies tell us a lot of what they need, what questions they need answers to, so they can make smart and informed decisions. So just getting a little bit into the NIFA specific programs, most of you are familiar with A1201, and it's this new RFA that just came out. It's newly rebranded as Animal Breeding Genetics and Genomics. And so we have Dr. Angelica Van Goor, who's one of the 2 national program leaders in this program. She joined us, I think, about a year ago after earning her PhD at Iowa State and being spent some time with the ARS in Beltsville. And Angelica had been a AAAS fellow prior with the NIFA. Also, Beth Crable is our program specialist. Beth's been around for just over a year. NIFA, and she's finishing up her PhD in animal genetics at Colorado State. And then myself, I think I already introduced myself, so let's keep moving. So within this program, one of the key features is the animal genome blueprint, which I'm sure most people on this call are familiar with, and I know that several in the call have helped draft it as well, or participated in other capacities. So it's completely stakeholder driven, and the reason why we have this is to provide some stability and to guide funding and research initiatives within the community. So how did NIFA use this information? So NIFA identified 4 target areas from this blueprint and added it to the RFA. And those areas, if a submission is sent for that specific area, we actually offer twice the money to address one of those 4 target areas. So that's currently our programs offer $650,000 for a standard grant, and so a blueprint grant proposal is 1.3 million at most. Now, this could have not only an impact in our discipline, but also on other ancillary disciplines in animal science. I'll get to that a little further down the presentation. These are the 4 target areas that were pulled out of the blueprint, and you're going to see they're the same for this year in the RFA, so we have not changed that. It does not mean that other areas identified in the blueprint are not relevant. Absolutely, they are relevant. They can be submitted, but they'll be submitted as a standard grant proposal. Right, so these cover a wide range of possibilities here, and should be able to provide answers to many questions that we still have, and developing a lot of methods and tools, not only to capture data, but to also analyze and interpret and help interpretation of that. When we talk about this program, the Animal Breeding Genetics and Genomics, I worked so many years in industry. I'm an operations guy. If you want to label me something, I'm always looking at what can we do with this. So I like to think about the building blocks of this program, which are the fundamental knowledge in genetics and genomics. Then you add the statistics and bioinformatics tools, and you consider population structures and breeding schemes. And these all together should funnel down to some sort of application of breeding programs. So I see the program as having 2 main goals. One is to increase our knowledge in these 3 areas, and the other is to show the way and how can this be made into something that our ultimate stakeholders can use it, right? Plant genetics has advanced already to creating a new program about varieties, and I think Christian will cover that a little bit in his presentation. We're not there yet with animal breeding genetics, but maybe that's something that will be addressed in the future. So as just mentioned, we want to advance knowledge in animal breeding genetics. That's our foundational purpose. How to capture new data, how to, develop new phenotypes. We have all the population quantitative and statistical genetics behind this that need constant updating because new types of data are become available and new types of objectives keep being developed. We're going to need all the kinds of bioinformatics, genomics, and genetics tools, and what comes after that, which hasn't been discovered yet. And also breeding strategies and ways to incorporate this information into practical plans or within the program purpose. We're trying to make this program more stable in terms of not chasing what's new, and being less directive, but by leaving the program as open as possible for the new ideas that come along. And so we think that that's the best way to keep the program current and relevant, is not to dictate what we want and just simply open the door and say, tell us your ideas, we'll try to figure out if this is the best way to go forward with our funding money. Also, we have a leveraging purpose, which is to enable networks. not only for creation, but dissemination of knowledge. And we want to support these breeding programs, both the public and the private breeding programs, which I like to think as being the ultimate purpose of this project. So the area priorities, these are taken out of the RFA as well. We're talking about selection theory and modeling, combining all this new type of data in breeding programs, developing breeding strategies, both national or maybe regional, depending on the species. We're looking at genetic diversity and how we can protect it to be able to exploit it in the future. This could be in the form of preserving germplasm, both in vivo and in vitro, different strategies, different objectives and possibilities. And with ever evolving data capture models, we keep thinking about how new phenotypes can be developed and used in breeding programs. Just a quick overview of what we've been able to fund in the last, say now it's 6 or 7 years there. 2017, we had that extra FANG call, which we got 3 large projects, NIFA with 6 million, but actually the total funding is 7.5. So I put that separate from the other 2017. And pretty much every year we've been able to provide support for conferences. The numbers in 2021 look really good. That's because we're working with 1.5 years worth of funding, and the same thing will happen in 2022. We have 3 years worth of funds to spend in 2 cycles. So you could expect a similar value. Now that we've seen the new budget, if NIFA leadership keeps our funding levels consistent for 2022, we should have similar value to be able to support research proposals that come in. I do have some highlighted funded projects here. I don't want to spend a lot of time on them. Just give you a quick flavor of what we're doing. So there's an assembly and annotation of the rainbow trout genome, and looking at welfare and productivity of lactating sows. The goals don't have to be strictly genetics. They could impact other disciplines around. The bovine genome, we had the functional annotation. This was one of the large FANG grants. It was provided in signed in 2017, started in 2018. And adaptation of single-step BLUP for complex data analysis and incorporating sequence information. Keeping the statistical side of it running abreast with the genomic side. AFRI has a lot of other programs. The first 5 there are managed within the division that I work. And all of these provide opportunities for you to submit your projects in genomics and genetics. To me, the key differentiator here is what is the ultimate focus. So you may have a really good project with animal welfare or with animal health, and you're using genomics as an essential tool or a part of that. So they could be directed to these other programs. To me, the key here is if you have an idea and you're not sure, look at our RFA, look at who are the national program leaders, and give us a call. And we'll be glad to schedule a short meeting with you, a Zoom meeting to discuss your possibilities. And when you do that, go ahead and send us a paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs, just describing in broad strokes what you want to do, because we might want to involve a colleague from that manage another program in the same call. So that gives us the chance to provide you with some information so you can send your proposal to the program where it has the best chance of being funded. We also have 2 cross-cutting programs there, one that's managed in our division, which is the interdisciplinary engagement and animal systems, where you're looking for, solutions to key problems, but using ideas from different disciplines, and no pun intended, because the acronym of this program is IDEAS. And also the data science for food and agricultural systems, which is not managed by our division, but this is kind of the crossroads of data utilization and big questions in food and agriculture. So it has to be strong on both ends. Dr. Ann Stapleton is the lead NPL on that one. And so you can't just have a question in animal genetics and say, I'm going to use this methodology. No, you have to be developing the data methodology, whether it's capture, storage, or analysis, and having the question in agriculture together. I know this was a little rushed, but I appreciate everybody listening in today. I wanted to stay within my time limit. So we have plenty of time for questions if the audience wants to. Always visit AG2PI's website. The team here has been doing a great job in keeping it updated and relevant, and have a lot of good information there. And also our NIFA website, where you have the request for the current RFAs listed there for AFRI and beyond. So I give it back to you, Dr. Deckers.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Appreciate it, the updates and the very valuable information. We'll take some questions now, but I think we'll leave most of the question time at the end, because I'm sure that quite a few of the questions go across what Frank and what Christian are talking about. So, but are there any specific questions for Frank at this point? Just raise your hand or just speak up. I may raise one here for new faculty members. I think over the years, the impression is that it's become harder for new faculty members, assistant professors to be successful in getting a grant. But I also know that NIFA has some mechanisms to facilitate that. Could you say a little bit about that?
Thank you, Jack. That's a really good question. And when I was at Maryland, although I had some previous experience, it was not in this country to pursue grants. And the system was intimidating to me. I'll be very upfront about it. Not to mention that I couldn't even ask for NIFA's predecessor. I had to go to NSF, which made it even more scary. But we don't have a mechanism that rewards you being early career specifically. But we do have for smaller institutions. Now, if you're early career, I think the two best things you can do is, one, get to collaborate with a more experienced colleague. If not in your department or university, with somewhere else, I think that makes a big difference, because you can learn the ropes and you get valuable experience with that. The other is, don't be shy to call. I mean, believe me, and Christian, and I saw that Angelica was in the call, the fun part of our job is talking to people that call in. We really like to do that. We'll try to provide with as much help as we can, guide you to some good resources. I mean, we don't help with the grant writing for obvious reasons, because we need to be impartial to that. But there are no specific programs for new investigators. A lot of them try to come through seed grants, which I think is a good way to do. And especially if you work for a smaller institution, then we have some in an EPSCoR state. We also have some, it's called phase, spelled with an F, phase funds, that we're mandated to spend at least 15% of our funding with some categories of universities. But we try to do better than that every time we have an opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Okay, there's a question in the chat. Oh, and Angelica has put some information in the chat.
That's nice. Yeah, thanks for reminding me of that, Angelica. I saw you, Chris. We had a long workshop last year with a lot of information for new investigators, and those are all on YouTube. And I think there's a lot of good information there that people can rely on. I think Chris had a question for me.
Yeah, Jack, can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So one thing that I see as something that could be discussed perhaps, or maybe it is discussed in NIFA, is more coordination between programs that are primarily on doing research and funding research programs, and those funding training of students. And I was wondering if there's a possibility of thinking along those lines, especially with this new opportunity of AG2PI. It's one of the big needs we have in genome to phenome is training students in computation and bioinformatics and analyzing that data. And there's not a, certainly you can embed a training of a student in a research program, but it would be great to think about additional kinds of opportunities like training grants.
Yeah, so we have the postdoctoral grants, which is a program that the candidates themselves write the proposals and send them up. That's one possibility, Chris. And, you know, to be honest, I'm not very familiar with our workforce development opportunities, but I think if you take a look at that.
I'm going to be covering that a little bit in my talk, Chris.
Great.
So
Thank
maybe
you, Chris.
wait for the end.
Okay,
Can
sounds
I
great.
run to Christian? Yeah, good.
Sure.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, so there's a question from Imtiaz about climate change. Maybe I will leave that to the end also, because that, you know, goes across animals and plants. Question from Getachew: is there any special attention for studies in animal or crop diversity rich areas? Maybe Frank, you can talk about the animal side, and then
Yeah,
Christian,
I'd say we're project quality driven, and I don't think there's any ugly ducklings in proposals that come around. I mean, if it's something that's relevant to our program, and we'll try to get the best reviewers for that, and we'll look at it very carefully. I think, as I said earlier, we want to be as broad as possible and encourage different types of submissions that look at different questions.
Okay. So Christian, you may cover that in your talk also, otherwise we can come back to it. Question from Tae-Hyun Kim: will the increased funding for blueprint projects be sustained for years?
Yeah, at least for the foreseeable future, because we realize that some of those cost a lot more money to do. So giving only half of what you need would be counterproductive. And we haven't looked, let's say 10 years into the future, well, the blueprint will be done by then. But the idea is to keep that double of the value for now.
Yeah, yeah.
And
then
since we're at that, sometimes I get questions about the partnerships, and which allow you to add $150,000 to your standard grants. You don't get to do that with the 1.3.
Yeah.
So the 1.3 is the cap.
Then a question from Yvonne Dreschler: the limitation of postdoc grants and pre-doc grants is that requires citizenship or green card. And I would add one there that especially for the pre-doc grants, that they have to have passed their qualifying exams.
I think that's correct. Now, the work around it is that if you have a grant and you have a postdoctoral fellow or a graduate student funded in there, as far as the person is legally in the country, there's no citizenship requirements. But in order for you to apply individually for one, you need to be at least a permanent resident.
Yeah, yeah.
But I thought if they are already there, they still need a green card or citizenship. They can't be on a like H-1B.
Yeah, that's right, Yvonne. That's to make their own application. But if you have a grant and you put there, I'm going to fund one postdoc at your university, Western has accepted the student, it's eligible to go in there.
Oh, okay. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we'll stop here, and then we'll come back with questions that will go across the different fields at the end also. So thanks, Frank. And our next speaker is Dr. Christian Tobias. And as Frank already mentioned, he's a co-lead with Frank on the AG2PI initiative within NIFA. And then he's also the national program leader for EFRI programs in plant breeding at NIFA. He spent, before coming to NIFA, which just in the last couple of months, he worked for 19 years within ARS on the genetics of switchgrass. So Christian, floor is yours.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm really excited to be engaging for the first time with the AG2PI community today. I know it's been going on for a number of years now, and I've been busy looking at your YouTube channel and in your website and engaging that way. The highlights for me personally so far have been, the workshop on Unix and Git, and really just the overall quality of the seed grants that have been put forward. One that stands out in particular to me was hosting some machine learning competitions using sorghum high throughput phenotyping data. This was Abby Stylianou's proposal. I mean, that sounds great. I know it's not going to compete with March Madness or anything, but I like the idea of a competition for sure. Another one was Courtney Daigle's team at Texas A&M University that's building a database of heat stress indicators in dairy cows. That's just seems like a really important resource to have. So hopefully there'll be more of these proposals that are able to be funded. I know the last call, I think the deadline has just been extended, but it may have already ended now. So I hope you come away from my talk, at the very least, knowing where to find more information. This talk is loaded with links and email addresses, and hopefully it can be posted on the AG2PI site so that you can actually use those links rather than just see them during the presentation. I also will be talking a little bit about pre and postdoctoral opportunities. I hope you come away also with greater knowledge of programs in AFRI and plant breeding and other non-AFRI programs that support plant breeding. And then if I get some time at the end, we'll go over a few tips on how to apply for these grants. So this is a really busy slide. There are lots of programs that exist within NIFA to meet your joint research project needs. These are mostly plant related. And generally they fall into two categories, competitive programs, AFRI and non-AFRI. And for those of you that are interested in high throughput phenotyping or precision agriculture, some of the non-AFRI programs include partnerships with between NSF and NIFA. For instance, the National Robotics Initiative, Artificial Intelligence Institutes that were mentioned already and are run managed by Ann Stapleton, and Cyber Physical Systems. They're in more plant breeding related. There are programs non-AFRI programs that are funded by commodity boards for research on crops like peanuts and peas and lentils and potatoes. Then there are the Specialty Crops Research Initiative and the Organic Research Extension Initiative that fund vegetable crops and organic agricultural systems. And a lot of these programs are integrated, but have plant breeding as a component. So the AFRI portfolio, I guess, includes large coordinated agricultural projects. New for 2022 in plant breeding is this coordinated innovation network that I'll be mentioning later briefly. And then the phase grants that Frank mentioned that are really meant to help institutions become more competitive and attract new scientists and educators to careers in priority areas of agriculture. So to kind of get back to my title, NEFA wants your outstanding proposals, but really, I want your outstanding proposals in my plant breeding programs that I manage. But that's okay, because there are other programs as well if you don't want to submit to mine. For, the budget was passed yesterday. And there was a 1% increase for AFRI programs. So now the funding is at something like $445 million. And all AFRI programs have to address one of these, Farm Bill priorities, either plant health and production, animal health production and products, food safety and nutrition, bioenergy, natural resources, ag systems, or ag economics and rural communities. But within AFRI, there are actually 3 separate, smaller, programs or separate requests for applications. The first one is the Educational and Workforce Development Program area. Then the Foundation and Applied Science Program area, whose RFA just came out last week. And then, as Frank mentioned, the Sustainable Agricultural Systems Program area. So I'm going to be covering a little bit now programs within the Educational Workforce Development and Foundation and Applied Science programs. So this slide really consists mostly of links, so it's not immediately useful, but there are the 2 AFRI RFAs. I can't give you specific deadlines for anything in the educational workforce development because it's not out yet. There's a link to Part 4C. What we call Part 4C really describes the components of what's necessary to submit a grant, including the cover sheet, the budget, abstract, and narrative. In general, research grants, the page limit is 18 for research grants, including figures, and 7 pages for conference and sabbatical grants. The review criteria, these are peer reviewed. And a lot of our efforts are in putting together panels to handle these. They're reviewed for the merit of the application on scientific basis, or the merit for education or extension value. They're judged on the qualifications of the project personnel, adequacy of facilities and project management, and then the project relevance to agriculture and the call. They're ranked into 5 categories then after review, either outstanding, high priority, medium priority, low priority, and do not fund. The phase and EPSCoR facts are linked to here, and basically they give certain institutions access to additional sources of funds. This 15% that Frank mentioned, based on the size, whether it's a minority serving institution or whether it comes, the proposal comes from a state with a historically lower success rate, below the 40th percentile or so. So the educational and workforce development area has 7 different emphases. In this audience, it seems like it's mostly interested in the pre- and postdoctoral fellowships. So I'll focus on that area. For the pre-doctoral fellowship program, again, it supports current doctoral students that have advanced to their dissertation research. They passed their qualifying exams or whatever the institution deems as being qualify. There is this, not a citizenship eligibility requirement, but you have to either be a citizen, national, or permanent resident of the US. And in these pre-doctoral applications are, the candidate must be the sole program director and they have to put in 100% effort toward their PhD work. So these support $180,000 for the total project with a project period of 3 years. And they're not renewable, limited to $60,000 per year, and there is an institutional allowance. So because this is in another division, you wouldn't talk to me necessarily about it, but the person to contact would be Ray Ali, or email nifafellows@usda.gov. The postdoctoral fellowship is similar with a few differences. It's really designed to develop new scientists and to recruit them into food and agricultural sciences or the private sector. Now, certainly there's identified shortage of plant breeders many of plant breeders are edging towards retirement. And this program and the pre-doctoral program are hopefully going to fill some of that need in the future for a qualified, talented workforce. Again, there's this citizenship requirement. There's also a recency requirement, I guess you'd call it. You have to have received your doctoral degree within the previous 5 years. The fellow is expected to work 100% on their project and is the sole program director. So there's a little bit more money in these programs. We're allowed $225,000 for periods of up to 2 years for salaries and justified expenses. And there's an institutional allowance again. And this is, again, the person to contact would be Ray Ali. So now I'm going to turn a bit to my focus area, which is plant breeding. So within AFRI, there's plant breeding for agricultural production and plant breeding for cultivar development. So I'll go over one, then the other. This is the team. Ed Kalikow had a 30-year career with NIFA and was involved in planning, organizing, and managing a lot of plant breeding, genetics, and genomics related programs. His work involved a lot of coordination responsibilities with other agencies, national, international efforts. And he was really instrumental in organizing and funding many of the plant sort of omics efforts. So I was kind of surprised when I heard that he was retiring, and I was hired to fill his role, actually, and a bit like deer in the headlights kind of look. But I'm going to be doing my best. Ann Stapleton, who's the other national program leader, and she's been a great mentor to me, and also organizes the AI institutes and has a plant breeding and statistics background. There's another picture of Andy. He manages program areas for AG2PI as well as for quite a few plant-related programs. And Victoria helps with putting on the panels as well as workshops. So plant breeding for agricultural production is, the team that I showed in the last slide, it has really worked hard putting together now a new plant breeding roadmap that together with other REE agencies and the Forest Service has been adopted by the USDA. And this plant breeding roadmap is a much smaller document than the animal breeding roadmap, but it is available online. And its focus is really on public cultivars, addressing the entire breeding cycle in an integrated way, the need to improve breeding program effectiveness and efficiency across a range of crops. Training and workforce development is going to be a major emphasis. And then the inclusion of breeding on traits as well as crops that are desired by underserved markets and communities to address equity, inclusion, and also nutritional security issues that we face. So plant breeding for cultivar development is really conventional plant breeding. The applications must address later stages of cultivar development that are focused on testing and evaluation of developed materials in regional trials with the goal of releasing finished cultivars. The proposals need to address how the cultivar will be released and marketed, who owns the intellectual property. We need to hopefully have letters of support from stakeholders, how the research fits within the overall existing breeding program that might be funded by hatch funds or some other source of funding, and how this support will enhance the availability of cultivars in the market within the duration of the award. It can also include requests for plant breeding equipment ranging from field combines to seed or processing equipment or laboratory equipment to support plant breeding efforts. So the relevance and need to enhance cultivar development must be clearly justified, demonstrable, and we encourage research that also supports education of field-based plant breeders in this program. It's been going on for 2 years now, and we've received 9 proposals and made 2 awards. So that's where we stand with that program. Now, Nicole, I think it's time to run the survey. Can you handle that?
Yep, so I just launched the poll. If anyone doesn't see it, then please look at the bottom of your screen where all of your
Right.
buttons are and select polls.
So the question is, what's the success rate of proposals in AFRI A1141? And it's shifting around. I think it's stabilizing. So let's go ahead and stop that, and we'll accept that result. Do I just advance to the next slide? So the majority seem to agree that 16% is the correct answer. Is that what you see? So here's the what do I do? Do I stop share?
Yeah, you can stop sharing.
Okay. So now I can advance the slide, hopefully. It's not letting me advance the slide.
Try clicking back on your PowerPoint.
Okay, there we go. The answer is 27%, which was probably the least the one that the fewest people picked. And that's averaged over the course of the previous 5 years. So we're pretty happy with this number. It's a lot higher than many people expect, actually. And we do get a lot of highly competitive proposals. And as Frank mentioned, the funding for the 21-22 cycle was a little bit more than previous years because, again, we're trying to fit 3 years of funding into 2 grant cycles. This shows the awards that are given by state. It's a little bit misleading because frequently there's sub-awards to different states that aren't accounted for here. This is just a topic modeling that gives you the main emphasis of where these proposals sort of fall out based on non-technical summaries and objectives to show where the major themes are. So the program really addresses the entire breeding pipeline, if you will, from trait discovery to cultivar development. And actually, there have been a bit fewer, historically, there were fewer proposals that were awarded to cultivar development. And so we felt that there was this need to put together the plant breeding for cultivar development as a separate program. So the most funded crops were wheat, maize, peanut, and sorghum. But really in this program, the awards were spread over 36 separate species, and 5 awards weren't even crop specific. They addressed breeding methodologies that would be applicable to many crops. So new for 2022 is we're asking or encouraging applications for coordinated innovation networks, which build and coordinate public-private research and development efforts for major crop plants. And the networks have to address a grand challenge or theme. And then broadly, these themes are to increase production of nutrient-dense food, improve agriculture's effects on soil, water, wildlife, and climate, and enhance equity and justice in food and agricultural systems across different scales. And we expect that they will employ collaborative, state-of-the-art science and technical platforms that meet knowledge gaps and deliver innovation for commercialization across agricultural sectors. Okay, these coordinated innovation networks must address bottlenecks, crop productivity, and address public breeding priorities. And they have to show synergy, that is a benefit that would not otherwise be possible if the entities were working alone. They have to have a plan for continuity, for persistence beyond the duration of the war. Each entity's role must be meaningful and critical to success. And then there has to be a plan for coordination, oversight, impact assessment that falls under management responsibilities. So I don't think this has ever been an emphasis in plant breeding programs before. So it will be interesting to see how many proposals we get this year that fall under this category. Just a little more information here on the agricultural production. The awards can get a maximum budget of $650,000 for research, up to $800,000 for certain types of partnerships. Whereas these coordinated innovation networks, the budget is $1 million and a duration of up to 5 years. The deadline, most importantly, is September 22nd. For conventional plant breeding, the deadline is also September 22nd. And the awards are for not to exceed $500,000 for a period of 3 to 5 years. So that's now it for plant breeding. Let me just turn my attention to a few other things. Again, this is a slide mostly composed of links that might be informative to some of the people on this call planning to apply, especially if it's your first time. So I'd encourage you also to serve on a panel. It's a great way to learn how the sausage is made, if you will, and become better at writing your own grants. Which brings me to almost my last slide here, which is tips for effective grantsmanship. So the first thing is planning. So because proposals can be complex with multiple subawards, you need to allow adequate time for planning. I suggest letters of support typically don't hurt a proposal. If you need to identify who your stakeholders are, it really helps to show the relevance of the work that you're proposing to agriculture. We are now asking reviewers to review the data management plan, and there are online sources for building data management plans. And we're encouraged that people use fair data practices. I'd like to encourage you to not waste the reviewers' time, because reviewers are very busy people, just like you are. And if they read a proposal that's not well organized or well written, it just will piss them off, honestly, and they'll have a poor opinion of the research. So it's good to provide a clear, concise narrative and figures and data that are relevant, obviously. Just as Frank mentioned, it's very important to submit to the right program. And if you're in doubt, it's better to contact the national program leader. Having an example of a successful proposal from one of your colleagues can sometimes be useful as a template. And really, it's all about persuasion, clarity, infallible logic, and if possible, unifying the proposal around a really compelling idea that a reviewer will pick up on. And I don't have the link here on this page, but if you Google NEFA grant writing tips, there is actually a PDF on our site for tips on grant writing. So I suggest you use that. So here are main concepts I want you to take away. A1141 and 1131 are different programs with very different emphases, but there's other programs at NEFA and AFRI that support plant breeding. And new for 2022 is this coordinated innovation network concept. So I'm really looking forward to the fruits of AG2PI's new technologies coming together for collaboration, network building, and science. And I think AG2PI is going to deliver to really address challenges that are common to both plant and animal systems, complex traits, and interactions between genotype and environments. And I think you guys are doing a really excellent job in that area. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Christian. Again, a lot of very useful information about resources available and also tips for applying. There were a couple of questions in the chat already, and yeah, please put your questions in the chat, or you can just speak up. One of them was from Alison van Evenaam about success rates in the animal side, and Frank is answering those in the chat. Alison also had a question about the or a comment about the pre-doctoral fellowship awards and the timing of that, and that the applicants have to have advanced to candidacy by the time prior to submission, and it's also been one of my concerns, which the timing of that often doesn't work very well. And I think Alison had a good suggestion, which I don't know whether it's feasible within NIFA, is to requiring that they have to have advanced to candidacy before they can accept the award, but that they could submit prior to advancing to candidacy. Is that a possibility?
I think that the rule is they have to advance to candidates. That is the rule, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so. I believe
before
so.
you accept the award.
Yeah. And my understanding, the reasoning behind that is because NIFA is focused on research, but I guess the question that Alison asked, well, is it possible to find a middle ground and make the timing a little bit more workable for our students by still requiring that they have met candidacy when they accept the award, so when they start spending the money, but the submission, relaxing that requirement for submission.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jack. I recall there was one of the regular AFRI meetings we had last year where that's all we talked about, and the timing is never going to be perfect, and so because you have this one date right now per year, it should almost go like the conference grants, that it's on a rolling basis, and when they come in a good timing, we'll look at them in panel. But we get proposals for conference that come outside the cycle, and then we just have to go hunt for some ad hocs and some internal evaluation. And so maybe that could be a possibility. That's something that should be sent to whoever is in charge of that. I like those suggestions. The one point about putting it where they are now, which creates this kind of asynchrony, it doesn't really work well for everybody, is that those proposals could be evaluated in panel within the expertise of the applicant. And there's at least a lot of people in NIFA that support that this would raise the awareness and the visibility of the candidate. It's not an unanimous, but it was strong enough that NIFA decided to go this way. But please send these comments to whoever's listed on the RFA, because those are things that I know that NIFA takes it seriously, and they come up for debate often.
Okay.
Am I right in saying that I think you can defer an award until you have advanced to candidacy? I believe that's the case.
Yeah.
I think that's correct, Christian. In the case of if you don't have the eligibility, that could create this gray area that makes it, it will make it unfeasible for some people to be able to apply.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think it can be deferred.
Okay, there was another question in the chat from Jacob Washburn. Within the new investigator phase grants, he was told that the eligibility requirements might change this year. Is there anything known about that?
All that I can recall is that, there was a fixed clock of 5 years not after you finish your PhD, but after you get your first tenure track or equivalent type of position. But also there was some discussion about, let's say if you spend 7 or 8 years on a postdoc, or even 3 years in a very active lab postdoc, and you're all of a sudden you got 20 publications, and you got 4 or 5 of those in some really top tier journals. You're not really a new investigator anymore in the opinion of some people. So there might have, I remember a lot of conversation about that. I don't think these things are hard coded in the RFA. There's some rules of thumb inside NIFA, but every case is looked at separately to consider that. You want to really support the people that need the support on that. If you're already well established, when Jack goes back and gets another PhD and comes up, well, I'm a new investigator. Well, sorry, you're not really an investigator. So we'll rather move the money somewhere else.
Yeah, but I think in general, and both of you have referred to it, contact the program leader if you have questions or are unclear. Janet Lewis, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you very much. I wanted to raise a concern to the group in general, but especially to the NIFA leadership on the call. I previously was a plant breeder at Michigan State University and then worked for Bayer prior to them acquiring Monsanto. And now I'm a consultant with CIMMYT, part of the CG system. And one of the big concerns that I have is that there is, in terms of competitiveness for the United States on the agricultural research and development field, there is a lot of resistance and concern about the US, a lot of US institutions, from a lot of US institutions in terms of receiving germplasm under the standard material transfer agreement. And I can understand why, but for those of you who are not familiar with this, I think that this is really limiting advancement of US groups to use germplasm from international groups.
I know that it's a problem for the ARS plant breeders. They're not allowed to use those material transfer agreements. I think there's something about it that the IT or the IP people do not like, but I did not know that it's an issue for land grant universities as well.
They've, in my experience with interacting, because I am a consortium developer for the Heat and Drought Wheat Improvement Consortium led by CIMMYT. I work a lot with people around globally, and because of my familiarity with US research, I've especially tried to reach out to the US community. And there's been a number of people, I would say the majority of people that I've reached out to, they're legal groups, non-USDA people. Their legal teams have been saying they're not going to let them cross. They tell them not to cross with the germplasm. So I would say this is not just a USDA issue, but it's not just an ARS issue, but it's the land grant university issue too. And I think it's a weakness. Unfortunately, I see the weakness in the SMTA. I think a lot of people do, but I would hope that the US could help provide I would hope the USDA could help provide some leadership in this issue to help the competitiveness of the US research system. As a US citizen myself, I want to see the US thrive. So
I'll add one last bit to this. If I'm not mistaken, the International Wheat Yield Partnership has maybe dealt with this issue as well, and they've, I think, done that effectively by establishing a germplasm hub at Kansas State University. That where germplasm flows from CIMMYT to Kansas State for winter wheats lines.
Yeah, I have heard that the hub has been established, or that it was set up. Matthew Reynolds, who's the CIMMYT collaborator on the IWIP, he is my direct supervisor. So I'm working with him on Hedwig, the heat and drought work. But yeah, last I knew, I don't know that there's been any change in the recommendations in terms of crosses. In terms of crosses that are going to actual germplasm development for varieties in relative to crosses for research purposes. So thinking
Okay.
about the variety development stream. So I don't know, it's a good point. I don't know what the current situation is with the iWeb Hub.
Yeah, so yeah, it would be good to look into. Thanks for raising that, Janet. There's a question from David Erdl. Can you comment on the currently approved 2022 budget amount and how NIFA plans to use it?
Yes, NIFA is going to have internal discussions about that. I'll leave it at that because we really, until just recently, didn't know what the budget was going to be. And we just don't want to base our decisions on speculative data. So now that we have this budget and there's 200 million or 2 million, 2 million to AG2PI, the initiative, we'll have to have some internal discussions.
Yeah,
Good point.
and I think
Christian. There was really no way to know what we're going to get. And, you know, if you get a increase like this, or if you put another zero at the end of it was completely different ways to go about. So we didn't want to make 5 plans. It's like, wasn't it Eisenhower that said the plan doesn't resist the first contact with the enemy? So we needed something more solid to go ahead.
Yeah. No, and so our current the current funding will end in August next year, right? And so the new funding would be beyond that. So yeah, so obviously some important decisions to make. And you know, can I put you on the spot and say that if anybody has any suggestions or comments, they can send them to you for the
Yes.
future use of the new dollars coming in?
Couldn't hurt. I think it would be more effective to maybe send it to Parag Chitnis or Deb Hammernick or leadership. Bring them in the loop.
Okay.
And maybe talk amongst yourselves about it, so that I know there's a lot of it's a very large group, but if you have a consensus opinion about it, we'd love to hear.
Yeah. And we, as the current AG2PI leadership for the current grant, and we were also very open to receiving comments from anybody on how we can improve. Now we still have some time to so we can still make some changes. I mean, to some degree, but we're certainly also open to receiving any feedback that you can provide. And I think we're working on developing a survey to ask the community about the current use of the current funding. So, Frank, you have your hand up.
Yeah, that's very good, Jack. And I love the idea of having, you know, more than just an individual opinion, although individual opinions are also welcome. I would really encourage, if you want to contribute, to go to the Farm Bill and take a look at the language around AG2PI. There are all these statutory goals that we must address. So it has to be within those boundaries. And anything within those boundaries is absolutely welcome.
Frank put Parag's email in the chat, so thanks for that, Frank. Other questions or Chris?
Jack, I just wanted maybe to ask at that a little bit further, because I noticed that Frank in his slides, he had AG2PI as a separate entity from FAS and SAS and capacity grants. Is that the intent, is to essentially have AG2PI as a completely independent project, and so like not putting money into any particular existing you know, A1201 or the plant projects?
No, we can't not do that. That has to remain separate.
Okay.
I mean, that's the intent of Congress.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's difficult to interpret congressional intent. For example, one of the funding priorities was to establish rootstocks that would enable grain cover crops, which I'd love to hear how that got into the AG2PI, but it's a relevant, agriculturally relevant issue for sure, but it just came out of left field. So I'd love to know more about that one.
Well, I agree with keeping it separate. I think that's the right approach, and that hopefully will maintain the goal of integrating, the plant and animal groups together and working together in the future.
But if I can add to that, I mean, it is going to be important that it's made clear how AG2PI differs from the animal breeding and the plant breeding programs, right? Because, for example, the one that you mentioned, the root crops. No, you could argue, well, that shouldn't be in AG2PI, that should be in plant breeding, right? So there's some confusion that can arise, right? When so yeah, and I'm not sure, of course, NIFA gets directions from Congress and they have to deal with whatever comes through, but that is something that needs some careful thought on how to address that and avoid confusion. Other questions? Anybody? Go ahead and just speak up.
Well, I'll just say I'm thrilled. We had, I think, 58 participants at the peak here, 8 or 6. A great job by the AG2PI team there, and we're proud that we were able to give you some support on this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it very much. Yeah, very good attendance, especially considering that it's spring break for most universities. Okay, well, I think we'll close this off, and again, I want to thank Frank and Christian for your time and the input that you've provided and the opportunity and to listen to our concerns. And I realize that both of you are fairly new at NIFA, and there's lots of rules and lots of regulations, and they change. So. Yeah, so we appreciate you listening to us and listening to our concerns. I think the other point I want to make is I think the timing of this field day was just perfect, and it wasn't planned that way. We'd actually planned the field day, this field day initially in January, but then it didn't work out with schedules. But the timing ended up being perfect with the RFP having come out in the last week, and then the 2022 budget being approved just in the last couple of days. So from that standpoint, the timing was perfect. Let's see, what else would I have to say? Okay, if you have additional suggestions for field days, just submit them through ag2pi.org. You can continue the conversation on this field day on Slack. There's a Slack channel, and Nicole put the link in the chat. Also, as Nicole also indicated, the presentations will be, well, the recording and the presentations themselves will be on ag2pi.org, so that you can use the links that are embedded in those presentations. Field days every Wednesday. Please fill out the survey on this particular field day, but then, yeah, don't hesitate on more general feedback about AG2PI or anything related to NIFA. Provide information back to us or to Frank or Christian or to Parag. A couple of other activities. There's a training workshop that hasn't quite been scheduled yet, but a workshop on introduction to scientific computing. So keep an eye out for that, because most of these workshops, they fill up very quickly. So, but an email will go out as soon as the information is available and the registration is open. Seed grants. So the deadline for our third round of seed grants was yesterday. So the seed grant reviewers are going to work on reviewing them and making decisions. But then there's two other types of seed grants that are available on a rolling basis. One is community event grants and working group seed grants. And those applications close on 2023. April 2023. That's it for me. Thanks everybody for attending. Thanks again, Frank and Christian, for your contributions, and look forward to seeing everybody in a month or so. Take care.